So let's start talking. Welcome. I'm going to be talking about designing for phones based on my experience of designing for stranger things than that. Or are they stranger? So start off, let me click, and then the clicker will work. Yes, hello, I'm V. So I'm V Buckenham. I've been a game developer for over 10 years. I don't like to think about the exact number too much. And this talk is about one way that I think about when I think about designing games, kind of a place I start from quite often. And just the caveat to the beginning is like, this is not the only place to start from. It's just a place that I find helpful. It's like, like one lens that you can use to look at things, but you can use lots of other lenses as well. So with that, let's start with some stuff that I've worked on, so you get an idea of like where I'm coming from and where this perspective is coming from. So I have worked on indie games such as Mutazione with Deguta Fabrique. So I worked on this a long time ago. This game was in development for a long time. If you walk around in it and you don't get annoyed by getting hung up on invisible obstacles, that's me. I did that. Not much of the stuff I did is stuff that you should notice in it. But yeah, so I come from a kind of indie games background. Later on, I then went off and I worked for Niantic, which is obviously makers of Pokemon Go. I did not work on Pokemon Go. I worked on a succession of things which were in an early stage, which will never come out, but were pretty exciting to explore at the time. And I left there a few years ago to go work on a thing called Downpour. So Downpour is an app that you can use to make games on your phone. You can use it to make games very quickly, very easily. It's a good thing, actually, for, I think, prototyping out different interfaces. So with your indulgence, I want to demo Downpour so you can have an idea of what it is and where I'm coming from in terms of making stuff. So see if I can just mirror my phone screen here. There's about to be some audience participation. So, gear yourself up for that. This always takes a slightly annoying amount of time. Is it being closer? Does that help? Does anyone have any suggestions of a thing that we should make a game about? Oh, there we are. Okay, so this is Downpour. Let's make a game in it. Press new game. We now have a new game. Let's make a page in it. It's a nice kind of turquoisey color. You can't see that well because of the lights. So we can now add a photo to it. So now I have a camera up. I'm now just going to take a picture of someone's face. Put your hand up if you want me to take a picture of your face. Put your hand up if you're okay with me taking a picture of your face. Yeah, there you go. Great. Okay, so you're smiling. What happens after you smile? We go to a new page. We go to look.
Maybe Neil could poke me in the face.
I'll poke you in the eye. How about that? There you go.
Okay. What happens after that? I think I want you to look injured. Can you look upset and injured? Yeah, there we go. I think that's a good series of things. This is quite a linear game, I would say. But we can play it, So we start off, tap on it. Ah! Got poked in the eye. We start from a happy state. A tragedy occurs. What is the consequence? Unhappiness. So that's like, a nice little story. You could obviously insert more pages, more photos, more links. You could make it a branching game. We don't have time for that now. So let's call it a fable. Sure, that's a good name. And now I push this upload button. And now it is online. It is online at downpour.games. We have now made a game and we have published it online. Yes, in like 2 minutes or something. So yeah, that's Downpour. You can obviously use it to make larger things than that. But you can also use it to make things exactly as short and as dumb as that. So now let me stop things appearing from my phone. Great. So, but before I did any of that stuff, I was involved in, this isn't a surprise, this is literally in the title of the talk, lots of alt control stuff. So kind of, so alt control stuff like this, Teens, which was a collaboration between the games event collective I was part of, Wild Rumpus, and Keita Takahashi, who you might know from games where you roll everything up into a big ball. And yeah, making games like this, where there are, weird boxes that I built myself with controllers in that you interact with in ways that no one has interacted with a video game before. So that's my weird perspective, actually. That's where I come from. I come from this background where everything about what the video game is up for grabs. Is there even a screen involved? How do you interact with it? What do you touch? What do you do? How do you get an interaction? How long does it last? All of this stuff is up for grabs. So yeah, what have I taken from that? What I've taken from that is like a fundamental truth that you can't really get away from, which is that video games are always played with the body. In order to interact with a game, it needs to contact your body. It needs to contact your body. You need to take input and output into your body. And so when you start thinking about games, you can start by thinking about the body. You can start thinking about the way that the body moves, the context it's in, the social environment that it's in, the materials that it's touching. You know, how does the button feel to push? What responsiveness do you get from that? How bright is the screen? How comfortable is that to look at? Like, what else are you doing? What else is around you when you're playing? You often don't have control about these things, but that doesn't mean you can't think about these things. So let's go into some old control games and kind of think about this kind of thought process and how it starts there. So this is a game I made called Punch the Custard. It's quite a literal title, although you do have to explain it to anyone who's not from the UK, because they're like, custard? You mean like it's made with eggs? And then you're like, no, when I say custard, I actually mean a mixture of corn flour and flavorings and colorings. And they're like, why do you call that custard? And then you start having to explain about rationing and the war. It's a whole sidetrack. But what I mean is mixture of corn flour and water. And if you mix those things together, it's really weird to touch. I don't know if anyone has done this, perhaps when you were a small child. You mix it together, and when you hit it really hard, it's really solid. And when you put your fingers into it really slowly, it's a weird gloopy mixture, right? So it's just a really fun thing to touch and to play with. And so I was like, great, let's make a game around this. Let's make a game where the whole game is you're punching it, you know, and it is a video game. There's electronics involved. I set it up so that it basically works. So when you punch it, it completes a circuit. And when you pull your fist away, it empties the circuit. And then you've got to go as fast as you can for a minute. How fast can you slam down on this button that is made of corn flour and water? It's self-satisfying. And the whole game... The whole game is focused around touching this stuff. It's around this sensation that is interesting. It's like building on that thing and building on the social context of this running at events and running for kids. So it wants to be a short game so other people can play, and you want to come back and do it again. You want to have some competitiveness, which gives you a reason and a context and a framing for doing this thing that is itself already kind of joyous. So I also worked on a game called Beasts of Balance. This was a commercial game. This is actually how I ended up working at Niantic. They acquired the startup that I made this whatever. So this is a game about stacking these animal pieces. That's kind of where the game started from. We decided, hey, we want to make a game about stacking animals. How do we get electronics involved in this? The way that we get electronics involved in this is we use a weight sensor to tell whether the things have stacked correctly or whether things have fallen over. So again, you kind of look at this and you look at the objects and you look at how this is to interact with. And, you know, ultimately, stacking odd-shaped animal objects, that's an also inherently satisfying thing. Like, the point of the video game is to not ruin that and to enhance that, not to make that somehow different or subvert that. So instead, you've got things like if you're stacking it, you're already thinking, hey, what piece do I want to put on here? What is a tricky thing to put on? What is an easy thing to put on? You're thinking in that kind of way. So the video game itself instead is like, here is a reason that you might want to put on a more difficult piece right now that is more awkward, that will make things more difficult for you. But also, it never says you have to put on this piece, because then that means that the difficulty is tuned too high. Equally, the satisfying place for a game about stacking awkward objects to end is when things collapse completely. And there's a problem, actually, if you think about it, where you're stacking these awkward things, because what if one thing falls off? Now you've got a collapse, but also does it count? And like, what counts as a collapse and what counts as like a minor setback? So what we did was we said, if it collapses, you now have anything comes off, you now have 5 seconds to put everything back on. And this means, you've had a little bit of a collapse. Okay, great, there's a chance to recover from that. The thing it means that's more important than that is you've had one thing fall off. Now you need to scramble to try to put it back on, probably knocking out the whole thing and having a really dramatic ending to the game. So yeah, and a lot of thinking around the fact that like this is a game that families are going to play together, drunk people are going to play together. It's a co-op game. You've got a shared goal, but we also didn't want to give we're keeping track of whose turn it is, because if there's a family playing together, probably you don't actually want to take turns like this. Probably you want to allow somebody to say, no, I reckon we should stack this thing here, and everyone to go, all right, well, if you think we should, you stack it then. And you don't want to have to input that into the computer system. So that's a place where kind of less is more. So again, this kind of design process starts with, you look at the objects, you look at what are the affordances of them, what is satisfying to do with these, and how can I make the most of this, and how can I avoid getting in the way for places otherwise. Also, apologies for this cough. I keep trying to come around. Anyway, you might also notice there is a screen involved in this. There is a mobile device, either a tablet or a phone. And that's, also the thing we're here to talk about. So let's talk about phones. That's not beer. It would be fun if it was. Anyway, let's consider the phone as an object. So yeah, like what happens when we start to look at the phone and say, hey, what does this thing do? What's the affordances of this object? Where do people use it? How do people use it? That's going to be most of the rest of the talk. Just spoilers here. So things that we know about the phone. First up, it's got screen. You can touch it. You can touch it and it does things. Look, see? What an invention, huh? Amazing things. It's really weird to think about this stuff as if it's like a new thing. People were asking me what my talk was about, and I was kind of like, it's about looking at a phone and pretending you're an alien who's never seen one before. That's very much the mindset we're in, and it's really hard, especially with touchscreens, to think about like, okay, what does a touchscreen mean? But yeah, there's some stuff here, and I guess the easiest way is to kind of compare it against what is it like to use a touchscreen versus what is it like to use a computer where there's a screen and you've got a mouse and you've got a little cursor going around. So with a touchscreen, there's more of a sense that you're like directly interacting with an object, right? There's not that same level of like indirection going on, right? Where you're moving a thing, which is moving a thing, which is then taking an action. Instead, it's like the finger touches the thing, so the thing happens. Which is good. Other stuff there, again, kind of stating the obvious, but when you use a touch screen, the thing that you're touching, you can't see it because your finger's there. You can't see it, and your finger's not transparent. So that says something about how we need to design. It says the hitboxes have to be larger. If you want to touch something, people are going to be less accurate. So you actually need a larger touch target. According to Apple, at least 44 pixels. And they say pixels. What is a pixel? We're not going to get into that. According to Android, 48. These are minimums. You want it as large as possible because you want it to be easy to touch, because you can't really tell exactly where you're touching. Humans actually have really good things for telling where we're touching. It's called touch. But unfortunately, touchscreens are flat and do not give us much of that responsiveness. Did you know it's like an incredibly tiny touch that people can feel with their fingers? It's like the equivalent of being able to run your hands across like a tennis ball that was the scale of the Earth. Like you could feel the difference between a house and a car on that scale. That's how sensitive fingers are. Anyway, complete tangent there. Anyway, and that's one of the reasons that the fact that you can't see where you're touching and the fact that these hitboxes need to be large is one of the reasons you can't draw by just dragging your finger around on the screen in Downpour. The larger reason is I've just not got around to it, but that kind of finger painting feeling I find kind of unsatisfying, and that's the reason I didn't pursue it as the first off. Other stuff, like that direct interaction means it's nicer to drag things around. Dragging is a weird thing with a mouse. Like, it's actually a coordination problem of you've got to hold down and move the thing. It's a weird action. Works metaphorically, but much better on a touchscreen. Just going like that makes much more sense than click and move. Yeah. Other stuff, you can't hover over things. So that hover interaction is really crucial if you're doing multiplayer stuff. Like the sense of oh, someone else's cursor is on my screen is really powerful. And you lose that completely as soon as you go to touchscreens. I've been thinking a lot about that space, thinking a lot about that loss. Other things that we know about a phone. I'm holding this phone. Notice that I'm holding it with one hand. And this is also huge, right? It means you can use it in lots of places. If I was carrying my laptop around and using it, I'd have to use at least two hands, and I'd look like an idiot the whole time. unless I got that little, I don't know if anyone here has seen the rehearsal. The guy in that has a little laptop carrier, so he can just use his laptop whilst walking around. Saw that, and I was like, incredible. Also, there's a reason I've not seen anyone else use these before. Anyway, so you can use it with one hand, but there are limitations to this. The limitation is, if you're using it with one hand, where can you touch it? The answer is kind of in a limited range. Kind of the middle of the screen is comfortable to touch. And this is with my hands, which I think are reasonably average sized hands and a reasonably average, maybe on the small side size. Phone. Also notice the pinky finger holding out to hold it in place. That's a weird gestural thing, I think. This area is okay, feels okay to touch, doesn't feel the best. Also, yeah, notice that the left-hand side is more comfy for me to reach than the right-hand side. That obviously changes if you are left-handed or just happen to be holding something else in your right hand. Maybe a baby, I don't know. And if you try to reach the top, it's really awkward. Yeah, you have to completely shift your grip sometimes. So you probably don't want to put stuff you reach often right at the top of the screen. And this isn't the only way to hold a phone, obviously. You can cradle it with two hands. You can also, hold it with two hands. You can also hold it horizontally, which, I want some appreciation for capturing this footage of me using phone with two hands, because I had to get out the tripod for it, I was doing the other one one-handed with two phones, and then this one I was but I want to film with my phone and also use my hand to anyway. Yeah, you can see the comfortable area you can use here. No surprise, that's where obviously you put virtual joysticks if that's the kind of thing you're making. So yeah, this is kind of a place I've started from when designing games for phones before. I've started by just holding a phone in my hand and kind of going, well, but what feels satisfying to do with your thumb, right? I worked at Niantic. I think the Pokeball interaction is really great just because it does feel like a good thing to do with your thumb. The subtlety in that is something they got a lot of juice from, and it does just come from, you start with what is a pleasurable gesture to do. For me, that's a kind of arcing gesture with my thumb. Yeah, the other thing you notice with this is that this isn't normally how people hold their phones. And that means that if they're playing your game like this, they've stopped doing all the other stuff they're doing on their phone. They've stopped swapping between apps, and they're sitting down and playing this. And that means your session times are going to be longer if you're making a horizontal phone than if you're making a vertical one. You're not going to be swiping to a thing, playing for 3 minutes, and then swiping away again if you're doing this, because you have to rotate it. A whole gesture. Weird. Anyway, this brings me on to my next point. Things about phones. You carry it everywhere. You pretty much have your phone on with you the whole time, all through the day. I do. I think most people do. I looked up actual stats on this. It seems like people generally open their phone, turn it on to do something 80 times a day, which if you take into account the fact that people are sleeping for a chunk of the day, averages out to about every 12 minutes. That went up over the pandemic and then went down again. Usage time didn't go up as much as session time, which surprises me. Anyway, but yeah, what does this mean? It means that if you're making a game for a phone, it can be really short. We can have these kind of 3-minute session times because people are carrying it with them, so they can be just jump into a thing, play a game for a really short period of time, and then jump out again. Designing around this is really key if you're trying to make that kind of game, right? And that means, hey, you should think really carefully about how long it takes for your game to start up. How long it takes like a console game to start up doesn't matter nearly as much as if it's a mobile game that's going to launch really quickly. I get really frustrated with Unity for this, actually. You can't get the session times quite short enough. That's something I was really thinking about when I was making Downpour, because I wanted something you could use and you could switch between in that kind of way. Yeah, so it also says, hey, you're designing for these, possibly for these really small chunks of the day. And then you've got to think about, hey, what context are people going to be in? Like, where are people going to be doing stuff? How is this stuff going to break down in this kind of way? I mean, the broader term for this is the attention economy, right? Niantic, the whole idea there is like, hey, people play games through a lot of the day. What if we took the time that they go for a nice walk and we cram games in there? That's some territory that hasn't been claimed so far. Like that's a really weird way to think about stuff. There's this great talk by Paolo Pedicini where he goes into this and talks about making games for when you're sleeping. There's also a Pokemon game for when you're sleeping. Making a game for when you're sleeping, making a game for unborn babies, making a game for any of these cracks of possible attention that might not have been claimed yet. I personally think that this is maybe overrated. Maybe there is a virtue to being bored, but again, that's a different topic. So other things about this, you carry phones everywhere, and that means you use them in public. Oh, really sorry about this. So the fact that people play games in public means that if people are playing your game in public, you have a great opportunity to try to sell other people on your game. Because if you're playing a game in public, people might look over your shoulder, see what you're playing. And maybe they look over your shoulder, see what you're playing, think that seems interesting, and then end up going off, downloading it, asking you about it, so on like that. There's this really great talk by Zach Gage called Designing for Subway Legibility, which talks about designing games for exactly this. How can you make a game that when somebody looks over your shoulder to see you playing it, they go, oh, that seems interesting, and they're able to understand what the hell is going on, right? So his technique for this is the kind of design thing of the 3 reads, right? It's the, when you look at something, what are the most prominent features? How does that say, what is this about, you know? There's a robot hitting another robot with a big sword. Great, I know the kind of game this is. There's a bunch of jumbled letters. Great, this is an anagram game. You already have a sense of, what is this about? Am I gonna like this? What is the appeal for it? And then as you look closer, this is the 2nd and 3rd reads, you get more into the details of this. You get more into the, how exactly does this work? Like, what are the details of this? What is the twist on this? And I think this is, it's just a good design principle for a lot of reasons. But thinking about playing games in public and thinking about the fact that phone games are visible in public means that this is more important from this kind of marketing perspective than other games that you would play in private more. So you carry it everywhere, you use it in public. Oh, and you use phones outside the house. Hey, games, and they're not just for indoors anymore. What does this mean? Well, like, what are some things that we know about the outside? Sometimes the sun shines. This came up a lot when we were designing games for Niantic. It's actually kind of a weird thing because we were trying to design games for, the sun is shining. But we're also doing this in Britain. So often we were like, the sun isn't shining. But if I was in California, this wouldn't work so well. Also, you've got to think, hey, also sometimes it rains. I don't know if I have particular design insights for the fact that smartphones don't work that well when they're wet, except people generally don't like standing in the rain using their phone. Yeah. Anyway, so the sun shines, and this does have an impact on the games that you make. The best way to kind of see this is to literally take your phone outside and test the UIs that you have out there. So this is me testing. I literally just made an image that said, this is your game with a high contrast user interface. Put that at the top of the screen. At the bottom, it says, this is your game with a low contrast user interface. And notice that you can read the top one and you cannot read the bottom one. This technique, by the way, is the most powerful tip I would give for designing UI for phones. You've designed the thing, you can see it on your screen, you're looking at Figma or Photoshop or whatever, and you're like, yeah, this looks great. You don't really know until you've taken a screenshot of it. Until you've taken a screenshot of it and you've put it on a phone and you've actually looked at it in the right context. It's amazing how many things you're not certain about suddenly become clarified when you do that. If you're making something that's especially going to be played outside, then yeah, put literally the image on your phone, take it outside, see how it looks when you do that. There's so many times that we were doing design revisions of stuff and we were not sure about something or something like that. We put it on a phone and suddenly like, oh yeah, this is good, or oh no, these are the problems. Immediately became obvious. And whilst I've not designed games for consoles, my understanding is that that's also a thing that you should do if you're designing for a console. Like, put any mock-ups on a TV and look at them in an actual sofa TV situation. Don't just look at them on your computer screen, nice and big and sharp. So yeah, other things we know about the outside. There are dangerous things like cars and people who follow you down alleyways and holes that you might step into and then die because there's some pipes down there. This obviously came up a lot when I was at Niantic, right? Niantic cares about whether people die when they play their games. Hopefully this is not news to people. But yeah, so how can you actually design so that people don't literally die when they're playing your game because they weren't looking when they're going? Well, the main thing you can do is try to make your game so that it doesn't absorb 100% of their attention when they're playing it. Generally, when you're designing video games, you think about them as like, people are going to be focusing in on this thing, and they're going to be putting all of their attention into it. And to the extent I can capture all of their attention, that's the best thing. But actually, games are good sometimes when they capture less, or they have patterns of whether you're paying attention to them or not. This was definitely the case with Beasts of Balance. Like, if Beasts of Balance was something that demanded all of your attention and never let go of it, it wouldn't work for the thing it was doing, which was to provide you with a fun time spending with your family. If you're spending a good time with your family or friends, you want to be paying attention to your family and friends and what they're doing. You don't want to be paying attention to the game itself. So having moments of peak attention and having moments where it slackens off feels good. With Niantic games, there's generally the same pattern. The gameplay you do when you're walking is lighter. And then you have like stuff like the battles and stuff like that, where you're expected to be standing in one place and doing this more intense activity. So this pattern of like low intensity and high intensity and alternating between the two of them, depending on the outside context of that. And allowing you to regulate when you go into those patterns allows you more control and allows you to adapt to the environment you're in around you. Yeah, so more things that we know about phones. Not very big, you know, like yay big. And people keep trying to make them bigger and bigger. I'm not sure I approve. But the thing I'm mainly kind of talking about here is that when you are holding them at a comfortable distance, they don't take up very much of your visual field. They're quite small, frankly. And this is good, right? It means that if you are using your phone whilst walking down the street, probably have some peripheral vision so you can notice large holes you might be about to step into, roads you might be about to step into, etc. But it also means that, yeah, this is another reason to put things onto your phone and to test them. When we were making Beasts of Balance, this was a big thing, right? We kept designing the UI, putting it on there, and then having to be like, right, put it on the table, and then we go sit at the normal distance, and is that still legible? Can you tell what's going on at all? And some stuff yeah, you need to look closely to peer, and some stuff needed to be really obvious. When the tower collapses, the whole screen changes, gives you a big countdown. You should be able to read that from far away. But if you're trying to go, oh, exactly what's the status of this animal here, that's fine to kind of get closer and peer into. So again, you're kind of at this 3 reads. Again, you're kind of doing this. But really, a lot of this stuff ends up being really obvious to see as long as you're putting stuff into the actual device, into the actual context that you're actually going to be playing with eventually. Getting as quickly as you can to the real context that players are going to be in. The other thing that screens being small means is that augmented reality is bad. I think that's the main reason that augmented reality in phones is bad. It's because you're trying to do this thing, you're trying to see a camera feed, but you're pointing around, but you can only see a tiny little sliver of this augmented reality, right? Hey, I've made a thing where it picks in a camera feed and now you look at it and there's dinosaurs everywhere. But the dinosaurs are only in a tiny bit of the world. They're not in the whole world. What if we could strap a screen to your eyes and cover your whole vision? That would also be bad, but for different reasons. But that takes us on to other things we notice about phones. Just looking at this object, hey, look, there are some cameras. So yeah, this allows us to do this kind of augmented reality thing, allows us to get this camera feed in and to do things to it, process it. And people are really used to this experience of pointing the phone at a thing to take a picture of it. That's a really natural thing that feels good. This is the thing that Downpour is based on, right? Like I walked around, I pointed my phone at people's faces in order to make this game. Like that was a natural gesture that is kind of the bedrock of it. So yeah, but there's other things you can do with a camera that don't just involve showing you what is coming through the camera in an augmented way or not. Yeah, like there's stuff like, what if you sample the color, just one color from that? Or what if you recognize objects and use the fact that the objects are around you, but don't necessarily show you the image of those? Hey, I can recognize chairs are around, but I don't need to see the camera feed full of chairs. Or you can use it to calculate precise movement, right? Hey, you can get like sub-centimeter accuracy of movement if you're going slowly enough just by looking at that camera feed, doing all the AR stuff, tracking. Like there's ways that you can use that are interesting that don't just involve overlaying dinosaurs into the world. And that's also kind of exciting because there's new stuff coming out there all the time because of AI, because of this visual processing stuff. So that's a new territory where new things are happening. More things that we can observe about these objects. You could hand it to a friend, but you're probably going to feel a bit uncomfortable the whole time your friend is holding your phone. So this says, hey, we can make local multiplayer games. That is a possible thing. We can make a local multiplayer game where everyone is playing on the same device. Obviously easier. You don't have to connect together stuff, but they're going to be kind of unsuccessful and not going to catch on that much. Which is generally what I've seen. I'm interested in local multiplayer games. I'm interested in stuff that works with phones, but I've not seen those catch on very much. The games that I can see that have caught on more are games like Heads Up, where everyone has their own phone and you don't have to network stuff, or Space Team, which has a really annoying step where you have to get all the phones connected to each other, but everyone's playing on their own phone, and so you don't have the uncomfortable bit of you're playing with some strangers and you're worried someone's going to run off with your phone, and that would be expensive. So whilst we're on local multiplayer, other things we know about the phone, this one is less visible, but it can connect to the internet. Turns out that's the smart bit in the smartphone. And so this says, hey, you can also have online multiplayer, like synchronous, asynchronous. Again, whole other talk about this. It means they have web browsers on them, which means you can have games like Jackbox. You can connect to a thing and have this kind of lightweight kind of multiplayer with other systems connecting into stuff like that. You can get live data from servers. There's all kinds of things you can do on that. Hey, you go in Pokemon Go and it rains in the game when it's raining where you are now. Look at that, exciting. You can send people push notifications. There's a whole other talk about operating system affordances, not just physical affordances. Even app updates change the way that you design your game, right? Also, it sometimes can't connect to the internet. This is also worth thinking about. If you've made a game that relies on the internet, then Sometimes that's not going to work. Is that a trade-off that you want to make? Maybe if you've got free-to-play business models, maybe you do depend on knowing exactly what people are doing and verifying this in real time, and you do need to have this to provide the experience, but maybe you don't. And there's affordances to think about in terms of when you have connectivity, when you don't, how that relates to different countries people are in, right? That's a thing we know about phones. People use them in different countries. So yeah, this is a load of different things that you can kind of observe about phones, and a load of different ways that you can take just these facts that you can look just by like looking at it and observing how people use these objects, and end up getting quite a lot of insights into how games are going to work and how they're going to actually be designed around this stuff. And whilst I was putting this together, I was reminded that my old Twitter bio read, "Creating elaborate excuses for inherently enjoyable experiences." And yeah, I think this is really kind of sums it up. This is a way I think about games, in a way I think is a really productive way to think about games. Like, observe what is already enjoyable, observe what affordances exist, and then construct scaffolding that means that people do that more, that brings out certain things you want them to do. I'm going to take one more example that's not something I've worked on, but is a different game, because the person who's done it has written about it. So this is Zombies Run, and one of the designers on this was Adrian Hon, who recently wrote a book called You've Been Played, which is a book on gamification, and he talks about the design process for Zombies Run. He says, "I wasn't sure I could design the perfect running game, but I knew I could design a better game by respecting and accommodating runners' requirements. This meant the game would be single player, so you wouldn't have to persuade your friends to join in every time you wanted to go for a run. It wouldn't ask you to change your existing running routes. Instead, its gameplay would map on to whenever and however you chose to run. And it wouldn't make you look at your screen at all when you were running, whether to check a map or to tap on buttons." So I really love this because it lays out kind of the same thing. He looked at, how do people behave when they're running? How do they use their phones when they're running? Okay, and so you look at that and you think about that behavior and you think, how can we design a game that adds to this and that, more importantly, doesn't annoy you by going against the way that you want to use your phone? He goes on to talk about how they went with audio because lots of people who go for a run are already listening to things with their headphones. That's a method of input they have. And if they've decided you're not going to touch your screen in order to have input into this, how can you get input? The answer is you use the GPS data. But GPS is unreliable, so you can only really get whether they've slowed up or slowed down or sped up. So that's the main input you have into this game. You start from, hey, what does this technology allow? How do people behave with it? What are the relation of things in physical space? And then how can we actually design that into a game? How can we wrap that up? How can we bring out the strong things and prevent the annoying things? Because after all, games are always played with the body. And I'm aware that like a lot of the things I've said are kind of received wisdom for designing smartphone games. I'm pretty sure there's not that much new stuff here for people who have been working in this kind of space. But I think it's really worth remembering where this comes from and how you can get to this stuff rather than kind of taking it for read. Because as soon as new technology comes out, right, like AR headsets, like the Vision Pro or whatever, or new AI possibilities extend how things can work, or people start using technology in a new way, you can adapt to this. You can look at it and you can say, hey, how can we take this technology? How can we take this random thing that some tech person has made up, and how can we make an experience that's actually compelling and actually works for people and actually exists within their lives? And I find that you can keep looking and you can keep seeing new insights from how do people behave and how do these objects work, and get new design spaces from this. Because yeah, games are always played by the body. You can't escape it. Bodies in places, bodies in contexts, bodies that are different from each other, bodies doing things that you don't expect, bodies touching technology. We want to make people feel things, and feelings are things that happen in the body, with the body. So you start by thinking about the body and thinking about how the bodies connect to the technology, and that's how you make people feel things. Thank you. So I think we have about 5 minutes, so there's probably time for 1 or 2 questions, if anyone has any questions. There's a question. Oh, wait for the microphone.
Hello. Yeah, thanks, V. That was really interesting. I thought the seeing all those things like separately, like you can look at it and go, oh yeah, we know that's there. We know it's got a camera. We know it's got the internet. We know it's got all these things. But sometimes we pick and choose like what we want for our game and imagine the ideal scenario and that works, and we forget, oh, actually, the internet might not work. So what do we do around that? So it was really nice seeing all those things sort of side by side and remembering you have to consider all of these things, even if you're not going to use some of them. You need to consider how that might affect the player that's there. So yeah, that was a really great point. I was going to ask, what's your favorite game that you've seen on Downpour?
Oh, I need to stop telling the story because it's a game that's not a publicly available game. Someone posted it for their own private someone. But my favorite game is one that someone made, which demonstrates really pedantically that he's not the person who makes a mess in the kitchen. I like, you know, like I really love it because like that's definitely not a thing. He would not have got out, you know, coding tools in order to make that game otherwise. And so it's like a personal thing that connects, you know, ideally, I guess, in a loving way, but in this case, just in a pissy way. But yeah, no, that's the first answer that comes to mind.
Thanks.
And another one behind you? Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I hated this question, but what are your planned updates for Downpour? Can I have a timer, please? Thanks.
Yeah, I do want to add a timer. I think that is pretty doable. Honestly, the only properly planned update is deleting games, and that's because it's done and I just need to push the update. I think the next real priority I want to do is being able to add in like a guest book into your games, like a little block where you can let people have comments. I think that kind of like closing the loop on getting some feedback from your games feels like an important thing.
Amazing. Another really awkward question. Have you thought about the monetization going forward and kind of like your I hate it. I'm so sorry. Your business plan for the game.
Yeah. I mean, so there's subscription stuff in there already. So people can subscribe if they want to link elsewhere on the internet and stuff like that, which there's a few people supporting. It covers the server costs actually. So happy enough with that. But yeah, no, I mean, there's more there, but I think this is just getting into like classic, you know, I don't know, free to play strategy. No, first I need to increase retention before I focus on monetization. I'm welcome to have this conversation with you or whoever else afterwards. Anything else? Then let's wrap that there. Thanks everyone for coming.